The receptionist would announce loudly, "Your ex called again," every time my lawyer contacted me about child support. She'd smirk as coworkers gathered to gossip about my messy divorce. When she started a betting pool about when I'd get fired, I knew it was time. Her last day became more memorable than she ever imagined. The phone rang at exactly 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, and I knew my life was about to become public entertainment again. "Sarah, your ex is online too." Heather's voice cut through the office like a chainsaw through silence. Every keyboard stopped clicking. Every conversation died mid-sentence. 23 pairs of eyes turned toward my cubicle like I was some fascinating car wreck they couldn't look away from. My hands trembled as I reached for the phone. It wasn't my ex. It was my lawyer, David, calling about the latest child support hearing. But Heather didn't care about accuracy. He cared about the show. The daily spectacle of watching me squirm while she held court from her reception desk throne. "Take a message," I whispered, but she was already gone, probably refreshing her lip gloss and preparing for the next performance. When my divorce started 8 months ago, I made a promise to myself. Keep work and personal life separate. I'd be professional, composed, untouchable. I'd wear my best blazers and perfect my poker face. Nobody would see me crack. Nobody would know that I cried in my car during lunch breaks or that I'd started keeping tissues in my desk drawer. But Heather saw through it all. She had a sixth sense for vulnerability, like a shark detecting blood in the water. The first time she announced my personal call, I thought it was an accident. "Sarah, your husband's lawyer is holding," she'd shouted across the entire floor. I'd felt my cheeks burn as I stumbled over my words, trying to explain to confused colleagues that no, everything was fine, just some paperwork to handle. That night I'd practiced what I'd say to her. Professional boundaries. Confidentiality. Basic human decency. But when I approached her desk the next morning, she looked up with those cold blue eyes and smiled like she was doing me a favor. "Oh honey, I'm just trying to make sure you don't miss any important calls," she'd said, her voice dripping with fake concern. "I know how scattered you've been lately." Scattered. The word hit like a slap. But she was right, I had been scattered. Forgetting meetings, losing files, showing up to work with my shirt buttoned wrong. The divorce was eating me alive from the inside out. And somehow this 24-year-old receptionist with her perfectly curled hair and cruel smile had figured out exactly how to twist the knife. The calls became a daily ritual. David would ring about custody schedules and Heather would announce, "Sarah's ex-husband wants to talk." My accountant would call about asset division and she'd practically sing, "Another lawyer on line 1 for Sarah." Each announcement felt like standing naked in Times Square while strangers pointed and whispered. But the worst part wasn't the calls themselves. It was watching my coworkers' faces change. Janet from accounting started giving me pitying looks over her reading glasses. Marcus from IT would pat my shoulder and ask if I was holding up okay, with the tone people reserve for terminal patients. Even my boss, Mr. Henderson, began speaking to me like I was made of glass, his voice carefully modulated to avoid any emotional triggers. 3 weeks into Heather's campaign of psychological warfare, she escalated. I was grabbing coffee from the break room when I heard her stage whisper to Linda from payroll. "So, is he still fighting you on child support? I mean, what kind of man tries to stiff his own kids?" The mug slipped from my hands, shattering against the linoleum floor. Coffee splashed across my shoes, soaking through my stockings. But I barely felt it. All I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears and the sound of Linda's uncomfortable giggle. "Oh Sarah. I didn't see you there," Heather said, her eyes bright with malicious joy. "I was just telling Linda how awful it must be having to fight for every penny. Men can be such cheapskates during divorce, can't they?" I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her that Tom wasn't fighting child support. He was fighting for more time with the kids. That the lawyers were discussing visitation schedules, not money. That she was broadcasting lies to people who barely knew me, turning my private pain into office gossip. Instead, I knelt down and started picking up pieces of broken ceramic with shaking hands. "Let me help you with that," Heather said, kneeling beside me. Her voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. "You know, if you ever need to talk about anything, I'm here. Divorce is so hard, especially when there are children involved." She was performing again, playing the concerned friend while twisting the knife deeper. I looked up at her face, so young, so perfectly made up, so utterly empty of genuine compassion, and realized she was enjoying every second of my humiliation. That afternoon I found the betting pool. Jenny, our temp receptionist, had left a piece of paper on the copier. At first glance it looked like a standard office form. But as I got closer the words came into focus. Sarah's breakdown betting pool. Crying in the bathroom. 2 weeks, Heather, $10. Quits without notice. 1 month, Marcus, $5. Gets fired for poor performance. 6 weeks, Linda, $15. Complete nervous breakdown. 3 weeks, Anonymous, $20. The list went on. 12 names total. 12 people I'd worked with for 3 years, people who knew about my kids' soccer games and my mother's birthday, people who'd eaten cake at my promotion party. They were literally gambling on my emotional destruction. My hands didn't shake as I took a photo with my phone. My vision didn't blur. I felt nothing at all, just a cold, crystalline clarity that cut through months of confusion and self-doubt. I walked straight to HR. I need to file a complaint about workplace harassment, I told Patricia, sliding a printed copy of the photo across her desk. She studied it for exactly 43 seconds, then looked up with the expression of someone who'd just been asked to solve world hunger with a paperclip. Sarah, I understand you're going through a difficult time, she said, her voice carefully neutral. But this looks like harmless office banter. Maybe even a misguided attempt at support. Support. The word came out sharper than I intended. They're betting on when I'll have a nervous breakdown. I think you might be misinterpreting the situation. Heather mentioned that people are just concerned about you. Sometimes humor is how people cope with uncomfortable situations. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. But she was serious. This woman with her motivational cat posters and her workplace wellness certificates was actually defending a betting pool about my mental health. So you're saying this is acceptable behavior? I'm saying that workplace dynamics can be complex during personal transitions. Perhaps we could arrange some stress management resources for you? I have a pamphlet about mindfulness techniques. I left her office with nothing but a photocopy of a mindfulness pamphlet and the crushing realization that I was completely alone in this fight. The next morning, Heather's smirk was brighter than ever. She knew I'd tried to report her. She probably knew exactly what Patricia had said. And she knew there would be no consequences. Good morning, Sarah, she chirped as I walked past her desk. How are you holding up today? The question sounded innocent enough to anyone listening. But I heard the real message. I can destroy you whenever I want and nobody will stop me. That night, I sat in my empty apartment. Tom had taken most of the furniture in the separation, and realized I had 2 choices. I could quit, find another job, start over somewhere else where nobody knew about my failed marriage or my messy life. Or I could fight back. The idea started small, just a tiny seed of rebellion planted in the fertile soil of my anger. What if there was a way to turn Heather's cruelty against her? What if I could make her the star of her own humiliation? I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found a name I hadn't called in years. Mel Rodriguez, my college roommate, tech genius, and the only person I knew who understood both revenge and web design. It was time to level the playing field. Mel's voice crackled through my phone at 11:47 p.m., exactly 3 minutes after I'd sent her the desperate text message that simply read, "Need help with something crazy. Are you still good with computers? Sarah Chin, I haven't heard from you since graduation, and now you're texting me about computers at midnight?" Her laugh was exactly the same, warm, slightly mischievous, with that hint of trouble that used to get us both into detention. This better be good. I found myself smiling for the first time in weeks. Remember how you used to hack into the university's grading system just to prove you could? Allegedly. And I prefer the term ethical security testing. I could practically hear her grinning. But yeah, I'm still in tech. Actually, I run my own web development company now. But what kind of trouble are you planning? The words spilled out of me like water through a broken dam. Every humiliating detail, every cruel announcement, the betting pool, HR's dismissal, everything I'd been carrying alone for months. Mel listened without interrupting, occasionally making small sounds of disgust or outrage. When I finished, the silence stretched for nearly 30 seconds. That absolute witch, she finally said, her voice flat with controlled fury. Sarah, honey, this isn't petty. This is psychological warfare. She's been systematically destroying your professional reputation and mental health for sport. I know, but I don't know what to do about it. I can't quit. I need the insurance for the kids. And apparently HR thinks betting pools about employee breakdowns are just workplace humor. Oh, we're going to do something about it, Mel said, and I could hear her keyboard clicking in the background. But first I need coffee and a proper planning session. Are you free tomorrow morning? That's how I found myself sitting in a tiny cafe downtown at 7 a.m., clutching a vanilla latte and watching my old college roommate transform into a criminal mastermind before my eyes. Mel had barely changed since our university days. Still the same pixie cut, now professionally styled, still the same intense brown eyes behind trendy glasses, still the same way of talking with her hands when she got excited. But there was something different about her confidence now. A quiet competence that came from years of success in a field dominated by men who probably underestimated her just like everyone used to. Okay, so here's what we're dealing with, she said, pulling out a sleek laptop and a legal pad covered in her precise handwriting. Heather is a workplace bully who's gotten away with it because she's young, pretty, and probably flirts with the right people in management. She thinks she's untouchable. She basically is untouchable. HR made that clear. Wrong. She's untouchable at your workplace. But what if we could create a situation where her own ambition becomes her downfall? Mel opened her laptop and started typing rapidly. Tell me about Heather's personality. What does she want more than anything? I thought about all the conversations I'd overheard, all the bragging and posturing. Status. Recognition. She's always talking about how she's too good for this place, and how she deserves better. She name drops expensive brands, talks about her networking events, posts those inspirational career quotes on social media. Perfect. So she's ambitious, image-conscious, and probably underpaid. What's her educational background? Community college business degree. She mentions it whenever someone treats her like just a receptionist. Mel's fingers flew across the keyboard. Excellent. Someone with just enough education to think she knows everything, but not enough experience to spot red flags. Now, what would be her dream job? I considered this. Something in corporate communications or client relations. She's always talking about how she's the face of the company, and how she could do our marketing director's job better than he can. Client relations it is. Mel turned her screen toward me. Meet River and Wallace Capital, your new fake company. The website was already taking shape. Sleek, professional, with stock photos of diverse businesspeople shaking hands in glass conference rooms. The color scheme was that particular shade of corporate blue that screamed, serious money without being flashy. How are you doing this so fast? I asked, watching her work. I've been designing websites for 12 years. This is like riding a bike, except the bike is made of code and revenge. He paused, studying my face. Are you sure you want to do this? Because once we start, there's no taking it back. I thought about yesterday's humiliation, about Heather's smirk, about the betting pool that treated my pain like entertainment. I'm sure. Good. Because I've been wanting to use my powers for evil instead of good for a while now. Over the next 2 hours we constructed the perfect trap. River and Wallace Capital became a boutique consulting firm specializing in high-net-worth client relations. Mel registered the domain, created professional social media accounts, and even set up a temporary phone number that would forward to her cell. The job posting was a masterpiece of corporate manipulation. Executive Client Relations Manager, $85,000 to $95,000 annually plus performance bonuses. Seeking a dynamic professional to serve as the primary liaison between our exclusive clientele and senior management. Candidates must possess exceptional communication skills, professional presentation, and the ability to maintain confidentiality in high-stakes environments. That salary is going to get her attention, I said, watching Mel fine-tune the posting. That's the point. It's exactly high enough to make her think she's worth it, but not so high that it seems suspicious. Mel created a LinkedIn profile for Janet Morrison, Senior HR Director, complete with a professional headshot of a middle-aged woman she'd licensed from a stock photo site. Meanwhile, I'd been observing Heather more carefully at work. She spent at least an hour each day browsing job sites, not even trying to hide it. She'd recently started dressing more professionally, wearing blazers instead of her usual low-cut tops, and I'd overheard her on the phone telling someone about putting feelers out in the market. She's already job hunting, I reported to Mel during our lunch break phone call. Yesterday she was printing out her resume on company letterhead. Perfect timing then. Janet Morrison is about to discover Heather's exceptional qualifications. The plan was elegant in its simplicity. We'd send the job posting to Heather through an anonymous career tip email, the kind of thing ambitious people receive from networking contacts all the time. If she bit, we'd schedule a video interview where Mel would play Janet Morrison, the understanding HR director who saw Heather's true potential. What happens after the interview? I asked. We offer her the job, obviously. With a start date in 2 weeks. Just enough time for her to quit her current position and burn all her bridges. And then... Mel's smile was absolutely wicked. Then River and Wallace Capital suddenly has budget cuts and has to rescind the offer. Very unfortunate. Very last minute. Very embarrassing for someone who's already announced their big career move to everyone they know. I stared at her, feeling a mix of admiration and terror. Mel, that's genuinely diabolical. Thank you. I've been working on my villain origin story for years. That evening, Janet Morrison sent Heather a carefully crafted email. Hello Heather, your profile caught my attention through professional networking channels. We have a position that seems perfect for someone with your background and ambitions. I'd love to discuss this opportunity with you. By 8 a.m. the next morning, Heather had responded with her resume, a cover letter, and a request for a phone conversation, at your earliest convenience. She's eager, Mel texted me. Almost too eager. This is going to be easier than I thought. I watched Heather during the day, noting how she kept checking her phone, how she'd straightened her posture and started speaking more formally to everyone. When our actual HR director walked by, Heather practically jumped out of her chair to make small talk. She's already mentally checked out, I told Mel that night. She's acting like she's above this place now. Excellent. Time for phase 2. The video interview was scheduled for Thursday at 6 p.m. After normal business hours, Janet Morrison explained, because our client relationships require discretion. Mel had borrowed her friend's downtown office space, complete with corporate art and a view of the city skyline. I watched from my car in the parking garage, connected to Mel's phone on speaker. Through the office window, I could see Heather in her best suit, sitting up straight and gesturing enthusiastically. Tell me about a time you handled a difficult client situation, Mel said in her Janet Morrison voice, slightly deeper than her natural tone with a hint of East Coast professionalism. Well, at my current position, I deal with difficult people every day, Heather replied, her voice bright with confidence. Just last week we had this employee going through a messy divorce and she was really bringing down the whole office mood. I took it upon myself to help her understand that personal problems need to stay personal, you know? I made sure she got the message that her issues were affecting everyone else's productivity. My hands clenched around the steering wheel. Even in a job interview, she couldn't resist bragging about tormenting me. That shows real leadership initiative, Mel responded smoothly. How did your management respond to your approach? They were very supportive. I think they appreciated having someone who wasn't afraid to address uncomfortable situations. I'm really the face of our office. I set the tone for how we interact with both clients and colleagues. The interview continued for 20 minutes, with Heather painting herself as an indispensable employee being held back by lesser colleagues and inadequate management. She name-dropped our company's clients, discussed confidential salary information, and basically handed us enough material to get her fired for cause if we wanted to. Heather, you sound like exactly what we're looking for, Mel finally said. I think you'd be a perfect fit for River and Wallace Capital. How does next Monday sound for a start date? I could see Heather's face light up through the window. That sounds perfect. I'll put in my notice tomorrow. Wonderful. I'll send you the offer letter tonight. As Heather practically skipped out of the building, Mel called me back. Holy cow, Sarah. She's even worse than you described. Did you hear her talking about managing difficult employees? She was literally bragging about bullying you. I heard every word. Good. Because now I don't feel even slightly bad about what we're going to do to her. Neither did I. Friday morning arrived with an email that made my coffee taste like victory. The subject line read, Official Offer River and Wallace Capital. And I watched from across the office as Heather's face transformed into pure euphoria while reading it on her phone. She didn't even wait until her lunch break. Mr. Henderson. Her voice carried across the entire floor as she practically bounced toward our manager's office. I need to speak with you privately. It's about my career trajectory. I buried my face deeper into my computer screen, pretending to analyze spreadsheets while actually listening to every word filtering through Henderson's thin office walls. Incredible opportunity. Prestigious firm. They specifically recruited me. Double my current salary. Henderson's responses were muffled, but I caught phrases like 2 weeks notice and transition period. When Heather emerged 20 minutes later, she looked like she'd just won the lottery and discovered the fountain of youth simultaneously. "Well, everyone," she announced to the office at large, "I have some exciting news to share." Nobody asked. We all just stared, trapped in the uncomfortable silence of people who knew they were about to become an unwilling audience. "I've been offered an executive position at River and Wallace Capital. They headhunted me specifically for my client relations expertise." She paused dramatically, letting this fictional accomplishment sink in. "My last day will be next Friday." The reactions were mixed, some genuine congratulations from people who genuinely liked her, awkward smiles from those who didn't, and knowing glances between the people who'd participated in the betting pool. I managed what I hoped looked like surprised disappointment. "Wow, Heather, that's sudden," I said, proud of how steady my voice sounded. "Well, Sarah, when opportunity knocks, you don't keep it waiting." Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "Some of us are meant for bigger things." But Friday was just the preview. Monday morning was the main event. Heather arrived an hour early, carrying 3 pink bakery boxes and wearing a blazer I'd never seen before, probably bought specifically for this moment. The cupcakes were architectural marvels of sugar and spite, each topped with silver glitter frosting and wrapped in custom paper that read, "Goodbye Peasants," in elegant script font. "I thought we should celebrate," she announced, arranging the cupcakes on the break room counter like she was curating a museum exhibit. "After all, it's not every day someone gets to witness a real success story." Jenny from accounting picked up one of the cupcakes, reading the wrapper with obvious discomfort. "Peasants? Really?" "Oh, it's just a little joke," Heather laughed, the sound sharp and brittle. "You know, like how Marie Antoinette might have said goodbye to her court before moving to a better palace." The historical reference was wrong on multiple levels, but nobody corrected her. We were all too busy processing the audacity of someone calling their soon-to-be former colleagues peasants. Marcus from IT took a hesitant bite of his cupcake. "These are really sweet." "Everything about today is sweet," Heather replied, then launched into what could only be described as a victory lap disguised as casual conversation. She spent the morning visiting every department, ostensibly to say goodbye properly, but actually to deliver personalized farewell speeches that managed to be both condescending and self-aggrandizing. To the accounting department, "I'll miss working with such dedicated people. Not everyone can handle high-level corporate strategy, but you all do such important detail work." To the customer service team, "I hope whoever replaces me can maintain the professional standards I've established. The phones can be challenging if you don't have natural people skills." To the marketing department, "I've learned so much here about basic promotional concepts. It'll be interesting to see how real marketing works at the executive level." Each conversation was a masterclass in insult delivery, technically complimentary words arranged in ways that made everyone feel diminished. I watched coworkers' faces change as they processed what she'd actually said, saw the exact moment when polite smiles turned into barely concealed irritation. By lunch, the office atmosphere had shifted from awkward celebration to quiet resentment. People were starting to remember why they wouldn't miss her. But Heather was oblivious, riding too high on her fictional success to notice the cooling reception. She spent her lunch break on the phone in the parking lot, probably telling friends and family about her amazing new job. I could see her gesturing enthusiastically through the window, her free hand painting grand pictures in the air. The afternoon brought the piece de resistance of her farewell tour. At 3:30 p.m. she appeared beside my desk carrying a small wrapped gift and wearing an expression of theatrical sympathy that made my skin crawl. "Sarah, I wanted to give you this before I left." She placed the gift on my desk with the ceremony of someone bestowing a great honor. "It's a little something to help with everything you're going through." I unwrapped it slowly, aware that half the office was watching. Inside was a book, Emotional Resilience, Bouncing Back from Life's Setbacks, with a bookmark placed at Chapter 3, When Personal Problems Affect Professional Performance. "I thought it might help," she said, her voice loud enough for everyone to hear. I know how hard it's been having your personal life become so public. This author has some really good strategies for compartmentalizing. The gift was brilliant in its cruelty, ostensibly thoughtful while actually highlighting every way she'd made my life miserable. She was literally giving me a self-help book about the problems she'd created. Thank you, I managed, setting the book aside. That's very thoughtful. I just want you to know that once I'm gone, things might be quieter for you. You'll be able to handle your personal calls more privately. She leaned closer, lowering her voice to a stage whisper. Maybe now you can cry in peace, huh? The words hit like ice water, but instead of the usual humiliation, I felt something else entirely. Relief. Because I knew something she didn't. Her finish line was actually a cliff edge, and she was sprinting toward it with absolute confidence. I smiled. Not the fake professional smile I'd been wearing for months, but something genuine and mysterious that made her frown slightly. I'm sure everything will work out exactly as it should, I said. She studied my face for a moment, probably trying to decode my unexpected calm, then shrugged and moved on to her final rounds. At 5 p.m. sharp, she made her grand exit. Henderson emerged from his office to accept her badge and keys, managing to look appropriately sorry to lose such a valuable team member. She hugged him, an embrace he clearly didn't want but couldn't avoid, then picked up the small cardboard box containing her desk items. The box was pitifully small for someone who'd worked here for 2 years. A few personal photos, some fancy pens, a coffee mug that said "Boss Lady," and the motivational calendar she'd used to post inspirational quotes about success and ambition. Well, peasants, she announced to the office one final time, it's been real. Don't be strangers. I'll try to remember you all when I'm making the big decisions downtown. She walked toward the elevator with the confidence of someone who'd just conquered the world. A few people waved goodbye. Most just watched her go with expressions of relief and barely contained disbelief. The elevator doors closed on her smug little wave, and the office exhaled collectively. Did she actually just call us peasants again? Marcus asked the room at large. Twice, Jenny confirmed, and gave Sarah a self-help book about personal problems. What a piece of work, someone muttered from the back of the room. But I wasn't listening to the post-departure analysis. I was already texting Mel. The Eagle has landed. Phase 3 is go. That evening, Mel and I drove to the co-working space she'd rented under River and Wallace Capital's name. The building was legitimately professional. Glass lobby, security desk, elevator music that whispered serious business in minor keys. We took the elevator to the 14th floor and found our temporary office. For $300, we'd rented it for exactly 1 week. Just long enough to make our illusion convincing to anyone who might verify the address. Mel had outdone herself with the details. A temporary nameplate on the door read River and Wallace Capital Strategic Consulting. Inside, she'd arranged generic office furniture, hung some stock photography of handshakes and skylines, and placed several official-looking binders labeled with fake client names. This looks disturbingly legitimate, I said, running my finger along the mahogany effect desk. That's the point. If anyone had bothered to check us out beforehand, we would have passed inspection. Mel was arranging papers in manila folders, each labeled with convincing corporate terminology. But of course nobody did. Heather was too excited about the salary to ask hard questions. The final touch was mine to add. I sat at the fake executive desk and wrote out a welcome note in my careful handwriting, the same script I'd been perfecting since elementary school. Welcome to River and Wallace Capital, Heather. We're so excited to have you join our team. Please make yourself comfortable while you wait for Janet Morrison to arrive for your orientation. There's coffee in the break room and your welcome packet is on the desk. Congratulations on your new position. We know you're going to be a perfect fit. I signed it, the River and Wallace team, and placed it prominently where she couldn't miss it. Tomorrow's going to be interesting, Mel said, locking the office behind us. Tomorrow's going to be perfect, I replied. Because while Heather was probably at home planning her first week outfits and practicing her new elevator pitch, I knew the truth. Her new beginning was actually an ending, and I was about to have a front row seat to the show. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that makes new beginnings feel possible. I positioned myself at the window table of grind coffee, directly across from the sleek downtown office building where Heather was about to discover that karma sometimes wears a business suit. Mel arrived at 8:15 with 2 oversized lattes and a laptop bag that looked suspiciously heavy. Surveillance equipment? I asked, nodding toward the bag. Binoculars, backup phone, energy bars, and tissues, in case you start crying from laughing too hard. She settled into the chair beside me, angling her laptop screen so we both had a clear view. I've got the building's lobby camera feed pulled up. Completely legal, by the way. It's a public access stream for security purposes. On her screen, I could see the marble lobby with its polished floors and corporate art. A security guard sat behind an imposing desk, checking IDs and directing visitors to the appropriate elevators. There, Mel whispered, pointing toward the street. Heather's silver Honda Civic pulled into the visitor parking area at exactly 8:47 a.m., 13 minutes early, because of course she'd want to make a perfect first impression. Through the coffee shop window, I watched her check her reflection in the car's side mirror, adjusting her blazer and reapplying lipstick with the precision of someone preparing for battle. She looked magnificent in her delusion. The white blazer was clearly new, still bearing the subtle creases of recent packaging. Her hair was pulled back in the kind of severe bun that said executive material, and she carried a leather portfolio that probably cost more than she could afford. Everything about her screamed ambition and success, if you didn't know the truth. She actually looks professional, I murmured, feeling an unexpected pang of something that might have been guilt. Don't you dare start feeling sorry for her, Mel said sharply. Remember what she did to you. Remember that betting pool. Remember how she smiled while she destroyed your dignity. He was right. This wasn't about cruelty. This was about consequences. 4 months, Heather had treated my pain like entertainment, had turned my workplace into a theater for her daily humiliation performances. Now it was her turn to be the star of an uncomfortable show. On the laptop screen, we watched Heather stride into the lobby with the confidence of someone who belonged there. She approached the security desk and we could see her gesturing toward the elevators, probably explaining about her first day at River and Wallace Capital. The security guard consulted his computer, then picked up his phone. The conversation lasted 30 seconds, long enough for Heather to start looking puzzled. He hung up and said something that made her check her own phone, then nod and head toward the elevators. What do you think he told her? I asked. Probably that the office is expecting her and to go on up. Security guards see new employees all the time. They don't ask detailed questions if the company name matches their directory. We lost visual on her once she entered the elevator, but I knew exactly what she was experiencing. The 14th floor hallway with its neutral carpet and fluorescent lighting. The directory board listing various companies including our fake one. The door with the temporary nameplate that looked official enough to pass casual inspection. How long do you think it'll take? I asked, checking my watch. 8:52 a.m. Depends on how thoroughly she explores. If she's smart, she'll start making phone calls immediately. If she's convinced this is real, she might sit there for 20 minutes waiting for someone to show up. At 9:07 a.m., Heather emerged from the building. The transformation was startling. Gone was the confident stride, replaced by something hesitant and confused. She stood on the sidewalk, staring up at the building like it might suddenly make sense, then pulled out her phone. First phone call, Mel announced as if we were sports commentators. Probably trying to reach Janet Morrison. Through our coffee shop window, I could see Heather's face clearly. Confusion gave way to frustration as she held the phone to her ear. She waited, then hung up and immediately dialed again. The number rings once and goes to an automated message saying it's been disconnected, Mel explained with satisfaction. Very mysterious. Very concerning for someone who's supposed to start work in 5 minutes. Heather paced in a small circle, then approached the building again. This time she spent longer talking to the security guard. We could see him shaking his head, consulting his computer, making his own phone call. When he hung up, his expression was apologetic but final. He's telling her there's no River and Wallace Capital in the building, I said. And probably suggesting she double-check her information. That's when Heather pulled out her phone again, but this time she was typing, not calling. Probably Googling the company name, trying to find some explanation for the confusion. 3, 1. Mel counted down like we were launching a rocket. Heather's face went through a series of expressions that would have been comical if they weren't so perfectly suited to the moment. Confusion. Disbelief. Growing horror. And then, The exact moment when she realized she'd been completely, thoroughly, and expertly played. She found the dog shelter, Mel said with grim satisfaction. Our fake website now redirected to the Riverside Animal Shelter, complete with photos of adoptable puppies and a mission statement about finding homes for abandoned pets. Anyone searching for River and Wallace Capital would find themselves staring at a golden retriever named Murphy who needed a loving family. Heather stood frozen on the sidewalk, staring at her phone screen. She looked up at the building, then back at her phone, then around the street like she expected hidden cameras to emerge from the bushes. She's trying to figure out if this is a prank or if she somehow got the address wrong, I observed. Give her another minute. She'll start making desperate phone calls soon. Sure enough, Heather began what could only be described as a phone call frenzy. Call after call, each one lasting longer than the previous, each one ending with more obvious frustration. She was probably trying to reach anyone who might have information about River and Wallace Capital. Former colleagues who might have heard of the company, friends in HR who could check their databases, anyone who could help her make sense of what was happening. After her sixth phone call, she walked back to her car and sat in the driver's seat with the door open. From our vantage point, we could see her bent over something. Probably her laptop, frantically searching for any trace of the company that had supposedly hired her. This is the best part, Mel said softly. Right now, she's discovering that River and Wallace Capital never existed. The LinkedIn profiles are gone. The job posting has vanished. Every trace of her dream job has evaporated like it was never real. Which of course it wasn't. But there was one thing that was very real waiting for her in that fake welcome packet. Something that would make this morning infinitely worse than just a prank gone wrong. How long before she goes back upstairs? I asked. She won't. She's too embarrassed. But she'll obsess over this for hours, trying to figure out what happened. We were wrong. After 20 minutes in her car, Heather marched back into the building with the determination of someone who refused to be defeated by confusing circumstances. This time she stayed upstairs for almost 10 minutes. When she emerged, she was carrying the manila folder we'd left on the desk. She found our little present, Mel said. Even from across the street, we could see that Heather's face had gone pale. She stood outside the building reading whatever was in that folder, and with each passing second she seemed to shrink a little more. What exactly did you put in there? I asked. The betting pool printout. The one with all the names and dollar amounts and predictions about your breakdown. Plus a little note explaining that maybe she shouldn't have made your life miserable for sport. Heather looked around the street wildly, as if trying to spot whoever had orchestrated this elaborate deception. Her eyes swept across the coffee shop window where we sat, but she was looking for enemies, not former victims, so her gaze passed right over us. She got back in her car, but this time she didn't sit calmly. She was gesticulating, probably on another phone call, trying to explain to someone, maybe a friend, maybe a family member, that she'd been the victim of an elaborate hoax. The real beauty of this, Mel said, watching Heather's animated conversation through her car window, is that she can't prove any of it. If she tries to tell people she was scammed, she has to admit she quit her job for a company she never properly researched. If she tries to report it as fraud, she has to explain why someone would target her specifically. Either way, she looks like either an idiot or someone who probably deserved it. At 10:23 a.m. Heather finally drove away. I never saw her again, but the aftermath of that morning rippled through both our lives in ways I couldn't have anticipated. Within a week, word had somehow gotten back to our old office that Heather's amazing new job had fallen through under mysterious circumstances. Nobody asked me about it directly, but I caught knowing looks and overheard whispered conversations about karma and comeuppance. The best part came 2 months later, when Marcus from IT casually mentioned that he'd heard from a friend at another company that they'd interviewed someone who'd tried to explain being the victim of an elaborate employment scam, and had been politely but firmly escorted out of the building. Apparently, he said, organizing cables at his desk while talking to Jenny from accounting, this person couldn't provide any coherent details about the scam, and kept insisting that former coworkers had set her up. Made her sound completely paranoid. That interview had been Heather's bridge back to professional respectability, and her own paranoid explanations had burned it down. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting someone's true character speak for itself. The first thing I noticed when I walked into the office that Tuesday morning was the silence. Not the uncomfortable, tension-filled quiet that had become our normal background music, but something else entirely, the absence of a toxic presence that had been poisoning our air for so long we'd forgotten what clean breathing felt like. Linda from payroll was actually humming while she sorted invoices. Marcus had his headphones off for the first time in months, chatting casually with Jenny about weekend plans. Even Mr. Henderson seemed lighter, his usual stress-induced frown replaced by something approaching contentment. "It's amazing how one person can change an entire atmosphere," Jenny whispered to me as we waited for our coffee to brew in the break room. I didn't realize how much I'd been walking on eggshells until I stopped having to. But the real changes started with the conversations. First, it was Marcus who approached my desk on Thursday, fidgeting with a USB cable and avoiding eye contact. "Hey Sarah. I wanted to say something. But when Heather was here." I looked up from my computer, genuinely curious. Marcus and I had always been cordial colleagues, but we'd never had what you'd call a real conversation. "I knew what she was doing to you," he continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "The phone calls, the comments, all of it. And I should have said something. Should have backed you up when you went to HR." He finally met my eyes. I was a coward. We all were. The apology caught me off guard. I'd spent so many months feeling isolated, convinced that my coworkers either didn't notice or didn't care about Heather's behavior. Learning that they'd seen everything and felt guilty about their inaction was both validating and heartbreaking. "She had this way of making anyone who challenged her look like the problem," I said carefully. "I understand why people stayed quiet. No, that's not an excuse. She was always cruel even before you became her main target. Remember when she made fun of Angela's stutter during that client presentation? Or when she accidentally scheduled the holiday party during Rashid's religious observance?" Marcus shook his head. "We all just put up with it because no one knew what to do. Or maybe because we were scared we'd be next." Over the following weeks, more people came forward with similar confessions. Apparently, Heather's reign of workplace terror had been far more extensive than I'd realized. She'd been systematically undermining people for years, always careful to stay just under the radar of formal complaints. Jenny revealed that Heather had once spread rumors about her unprofessional relationship with a client, based on nothing more than friendly email exchanges. Angela from customer service admitted that Heather had been intercepting her important calls and claiming she was protecting the company from Angela's communication issues. Even Linda confessed that Heather had been making pointed comments about her age and suggesting she should consider retirement while she still had her dignity. "The thing about bullies," Angela said during one of our impromptu group therapy sessions disguised as coffee breaks, "is that they're really good at making each victim feel like they're the only one. Like there's something specifically wrong with them that attracts the abuse." I thought about this revelation while drafting an email that had been months in the making. The anonymous report to HR wasn't about revenge. It was about documentation. About ensuring that if Heather ever tried to return or if our company ever hired someone like her again, there would be a paper trail. The report was 15 pages long. Screenshots of the betting pool. Detailed accounts of public humiliations. Testimonials from 6 different employees describing patterns of harassment, discrimination, and toxic behavior. Medical documentation of my stress-induced insomnia and anxiety. Performance reviews showing how my work had suffered under constant psychological pressure. I included everything, then saved it as an anonymous PDF and sent it from a temporary email account to both HR and our regional manager. The response was swift and comprehensive. Within 2 weeks, Patricia from HR scheduled individual meetings with every employee mentioned in the report. The interviews were confidential, but word traveled through our small office that they were taking the allegations seriously. Finally, a month later, I received an unexpected email from Mr. Henderson. "Sarah, would you be interested in participating in our new workplace wellness initiative? We're redesigning our policies around professional conduct and employee mental health, and I think your insights would be valuable." The invitation felt surreal. 6 months earlier, I'd been the office tragedy case, the woman whose personal problems made everyone uncomfortable. Now they wanted my input on company policy. The wellness committee met every Tuesday at 3 p.m. in the conference room that still smelled faintly of Heather's expensive perfume. There were 8 of us, a mix of managers and regular employees, all tasked with creating guidelines that would prevent future workplace harassment. "Our current policies are reactive," I said during our 3rd meeting, consulting the notes I'd prepared. They only address problems after they've already caused damage. We need proactive measures that create a culture where toxic behavior can't take root. The suggestions I made weren't revolutionary: anonymous reporting systems, mandatory bystander intervention training, regular climate surveys, but they were thorough and thoughtful. More importantly, people listened to them. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, the therapist I'd started seeing, helped me understand why this felt so significant. "You're reclaiming your voice," she explained during one of our Wednesday evening sessions. "For months you were silenced and diminished. Now you're using your experience to protect others. That's not just healing, that's transformation." Therapy had been another unexpected development. Not because of Heather specifically, but because her treatment had forced me to confront deeper questions about my own self-worth. Why had I absorbed her abuse for so long? Why had I felt responsible for managing other people's comfort with my personal struggles? "You've spent your whole life trying to be small enough that you wouldn't inconvenience anyone," Dr. Martinez observed. "Your divorce wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the beginning of taking up space in your own life." He was right. I'd spent years making myself smaller, quieter, less problematic. Heather's cruelty had been devastating, but it had also been clarifying. It showed me exactly what happened when you let other people define your worth. The therapy sessions became a weekly ritual of excavation, digging through layers of people-pleasing and self-doubt to find the person I'd buried under decades of accommodation. It was harder work than planning elaborate revenge schemes, but ultimately more satisfying. Meanwhile, my friendship with Mel had evolved into something richer than our college relationship. Shared mischief had given way to shared growth. We talked on the phone every few days, comparing notes on career challenges and personal revelations. "You know what's funny?" she said during one of our evening calls. "I learned as much about myself planning your revenge as you did executing it. Turns out I'm really good at strategic thinking when I'm properly motivated." "You should add workplace justice consultant to your resume," I suggested. "Don't think I haven't considered it." Karma Solutions, strategic problem resolution for toxic work environments. We could make millions. We both laughed, but there was something appealing about the idea. Not the revenge part, that had been a one-time therapeutic exercise, but the problem-solving aspect. The careful planning, the attention to detail, the satisfaction of seeing justice served. "Seriously though," Mel continued, "what you did took real courage. Not the revenge part, but everything after. The HR report, the wellness committee, the therapy. You didn't just get even, you got better." That phrase stuck with me. I didn't just get even, I got better. Because that's what the ripple effect had really been about. Not just removing a toxic person from our environment, but creating space for all of us to become better versions of ourselves. Space for Marcus to speak up about injustice. Space for Angela to address her communication challenges with support instead of mockery. Space for me to discover that my voice, when I chose to use it, was stronger than I'd ever imagined. The office wellness policy we created was implemented company-wide 6 months later. It included everything we'd recommended: anonymous reporting, bystander training, regular climate assessments, and most importantly, a zero-tolerance policy for pattern harassment. But the real victory wasn't the policy changes or the committee appointment or even the respect I'd gained from my colleagues. The real victory was waking up each morning without dread, walking into work without armor, existing in my own space without apology. Heather's absence had created room for all of us to breathe again. And in that space, we discovered we were stronger, kinder, and more capable than we'd ever been allowed to believe. The finality of it all didn't hit me with fanfare or fireworks. It arrived on a Thursday afternoon in March, 6 months after Heather's dramatic exit, when I realized I'd gone an entire week without thinking about her once. I was reorganizing my desk drawer, the same one where I'd kept tissues during my darkest days, when my fingers brushed against a small piece of paper I'd forgotten was there. The copy of the note I'd left in Heather's fake welcome packet. "Maybe now you'll learn not to bet on someone else's pain." Looking at those words now, written in my own careful handwriting, I felt something unexpected. Not satisfaction or vindication, but a kind of gentle closure, like finding the last piece of a puzzle you'd given up on completing. The note wasn't about Heather anymore. It had become something else entirely, a testament to a version of myself I'd discovered in the depths of humiliation. The woman who wrote those words had been angry, yes, but also strategic. Hurt but not broken. invisible but not powerless. I smoothed the paper between my fingers, remembering the satisfaction I'd felt placing it in that manila folder. Then I folded it carefully and put it back in the drawer. Not as a trophy but as a bookmark in the story of who I was becoming. My divorce had finalized the month before with all the drama of signing a cell phone contract. Tom and I sat in a sterile conference room while lawyers shuffled papers and discussed asset division like we were dissolving a small business rather than a 15-year marriage. When it was over, we shook hands in the parking lot. Not out of animosity but out of the strange formal politeness that replaces intimacy when love dies slowly. "I think we'll both be happier now," he said, and I realized he was probably right. The relief was immediate and profound. Not because I was free from marriage, but because I was free from the constant low-level anxiety that had become my baseline. Free from lawyers' calls and custody negotiations and the exhausting performance of holding it all together while my life fell apart in public. My weekends transformed from survival exercises into something resembling actual living. Saturday mornings that used to begin with panic about the week ahead now started with coffee on my small balcony, watching the sunrise paint my neighbor's garden in shades of gold and pink. I'd started gardening in containers, herbs and cherry tomatoes and flowers whose names I was slowly learning. There was something deeply satisfying about nurturing things that grew quietly, without drama or manipulation or toxic competition. My basil plants didn't judge my emotional state or bet on my likelihood of success. The kids adjusted to the new custody arrangement with the resilience children possess when adults stop pretending everything is fine. Emma, my 12-year-old, actually seemed relieved when I stopped trying to maintain the fiction that mommy and daddy just needed to work some things out. "You seem happier now," she said one Sunday while we planted marigolds together. Like actually happy, not just pretending to be happy. The observation hit me with unexpected force. How long had I been performing happiness instead of experiencing it? How many years had I spent managing other people's comfort with my emotions instead of actually processing them? "I think I am happier," I told her, surprised by the truth of it. "Sometimes things have to fall apart before they can come back together in a better way." "Like when you broke that vase last year and glued it back together with gold?" she asked, referring to a Japanese pottery technique I'd tried as a stress relief project. "Exactly like that." The reading had started as escapism, romance novels and mysteries that transported me far from my own complicated reality. But gradually I found myself drawn to memoirs and biographies of women who'd rebuilt their lives after loss. Stories of quiet resilience rather than dramatic transformation. I read about a teacher who'd started a literacy program after her husband left. A nurse who'd gone back to school for her doctorate at 55. An accountant who'd learned pottery and now sold her work at farmers markets. None of them had revenge plots or dramatic showdowns. They'd simply decided to outlast their circumstances and become something new in the process. Dr. Martinez helped me understand what was happening during one of our sessions. "You're grieving the person you used to be," she explained. "The woman who absorbed other people's cruelty and called it keeping the peace. The woman who made herself small to avoid conflict. That person served a purpose for a long time, but she doesn't serve you anymore." He was right. The old Sarah, the one who'd trembled when Heather announced her personal calls, who'd accepted humiliation as the price of employment, felt like someone I'd known intimately but had finally outgrown. The new Sarah still felt uncertain some days, still caught herself people-pleasing out of habit, still occasionally woke up with anxiety about problems that no longer existed. But she also did things the old Sarah never would have attempted. She spoke up in meetings when she disagreed with decisions. She set boundaries with colleagues who tried to dump their responsibilities on her. She said no to social obligations that felt like work. She took vacation days without apologizing for the inconvenience. Most surprisingly, she'd started enjoying her own company. Friday evenings that used to terrify me with their emptiness now felt like gifts. I'd cook elaborate meals for one, watch documentaries about subjects that fascinated me, write in a journal that nobody would ever read. The silence in my apartment wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful. Mel visited for a weekend in April, bringing wine and curiosity about my transformation era, as she called it. "You look different," she said, studying my face over Chinese takeout containers. "Not just happier. Thud. Like you're actually inhabiting your own skin instead of borrowing it." We talked late into the night about the strange alchemy of survival, how trauma could destroy you or reshape you, depending on what you did with the pieces afterward. Do you ever wonder what happened to her? Mel asked eventually, both of us knowing she meant Heather. Sometimes, I admitted. But not with curiosity. More like how you might wonder about a movie you walked out of. Mild interest in how it ended but no real investment in the outcome. That was the truest thing I'd said about the whole experience. Heather had faded from my life like background noise suddenly silenced. Her absence wasn't something I celebrated daily. It was simply space that had been filled with better things. I kept the note not as a monument to victory, but as a reminder that quiet strength often accomplishes more than loud anger. That dignity reclaimed in private can be more powerful than justice demanded in public. That sometimes the most effective revenge is simply living well enough that your enemy becomes irrelevant. The woman who'd planned Heather's downfall had been driven by righteous fury and strategic thinking. But the woman who'd built something meaningful from the aftermath had been driven by something more sustainable. The simple determination to outlast her circumstances and create something better on the other side. In the end, I didn't need applause or acknowledgement or even the satisfaction of knowing Heather had learned her lesson. I didn't need her apology or her downfall or her recognition of the pain she'd caused. I just needed to wake up each morning in a life I'd chosen rather than one I'd simply endured. And for the first time in years, that's exactly what I had. The revenge had been necessary. A bridge between who I was and who I was becoming. But the real victory was discovering that I didn't need to carry it forward. I could set it down and walk toward something better, something quieter, something that belonged entirely to me. If this story of workplace justice had you completely hooked, hit that like button right now. My favorite part was when Heather walked into that empty office, realizing her dream job was nothing but smoke and mirrors. What was your favorite moment? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more satisfying revenge stories like this. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.